Hello everyone, it's good to see you as always. The Goa government is giving all its citizens ivermectin as a preventive drug for COVID. Does it work? Will we need a third booster dose of the vaccine eventually? Can two vaccines be mixed? For example, if I get the Covishield in the first shot, can I take Covaxin for the second shot? Is the overuse of steroids in treating COVID patients pushing up cases of black fungus? We know you get a barrage of WhatsApp messages every day with half-baked and sometimes conflicting information. Please delete all those messages because WhatsApp is not a medical school. If you have a question, ask a doctor. So what I'm doing today is I'm asking Dr. Randeep Guleria, the director of the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, some very basic questions on this show today. I hope you find this session useful. Dr. Guleria, thank you very much for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to have you. Dr. Guleria, first things first. The Indian variant, the B1617, is more infectious. We know that. But has it been established that it is also more lethal? Because anecdotally, we are seeing people dying all around us. From 400 in April, we are seeing 4,000 deaths in May. That is a 10-fold jump. The question, is this virus more lethal? Is it killing more people?
Correct. We're seeing the number of deaths is much more than what we saw in the last wave. Currently, the data does not suggest that the new variant that we're seeing, the Indian variant, is more lethal in terms of being more fatal in causing more mortality or more severe illness. It definitely is more infectious as the data suggest. However, we need more data to be sure one way or the other. I also think we need to keep in mind that this time the number of cases has increased in a very steep manner. It's not only that the cases have risen, the rate of rise of cases has been very rapid, and this has caused a huge strain on the healthcare infrastructure. And I feel because of that, many patients have sort of taken treatment at home, stayed at home because of not being able to get a hospital bed in the beginning. And this led to, in my mind, to some extent, some decrease in the quality of care, and that may also be contributing to the mortality that we're seeing in this wave.
So, Dr. Guleria, is the new mutant cutting through the vaccine protection? So many people we know go in to get their second jab and invariably fall ill within a few days. A limited study done at the Fortis Hospital here in Delhi has also found that of the 113 people that they surveyed from within their staff, 1 in 7 hospital staff got infected after the jab. What is the connection?
So two very important things. One is we must understand that the vaccine itself, the Covaxin itself is a dead virus, so it cannot cause COVID-19. It's an inactivated virus. And Covishield is just, it uses a viral vector, but it's just part of the virus that is used as the spike protein area. And therefore, it also cannot cause the infection. So you cannot get infection per se because of getting the vaccine. But by going to a place which is crowded and not having COVID appropriate behavior, the vaccination site can become an area where people can get infected because you don't know who is infectious. He may be asymptomatic. And if a lot of people crowd together to get themselves vaccinated and they're not properly wearing the mask, then that can become a super spreading event. And that is why it's very important that if you're going for getting a vaccine or if you're going to get even some investigation, let's say a CT scan, make sure that you follow COVID appropriate behavior very appropriately there, because sometimes just being out there and not being careful can be a cause of infection.
Doctor, given how infectious this mutant is that is driving the second surge, would you recommend that people with comorbidities or people who are elderly don't go for vaccination right now? Wait for this wave to dissipate and then go.
No, I don't think that would be correct. I personally feel that one weapon that we have, which we must use, is vaccines, because vaccination will give you some immunity and will protect you from getting severe disease. However, it's better that you take an appointment, go when you, especially those with comorbidities or the elderly, go when the crowd is not there, either early in the morning or late in the evening, rather than when it's a peak hour and there's a lot of people standing in line wanting to get vaccinated. So that strategy one will have to develop, especially those with comorbidities, to go to a vaccination center which is less crowded and where you can time your visit based on the less amount of people being present there, and therefore less chance of getting exposed.
I wonder whether such a vaccination center also exists where there isn't a lot of crowd either early in the morning or in the evening. But Dr. Guleria, another frequently asked question, what is the ideal gap to administer the second dose of the vaccine? And how many days does one have to wait if one has just recovered from COVID to get the first jab or the second jab?
So once you recovered for COVID, the guidelines say that you must wait for at least 2 weeks before getting the injection, the next jab. Most of us would say that to be on the safe side, you could even wait for up to 4 to 6 weeks till you're completely recovered. But if you're very apprehensive, at least wait for 2 weeks and get your vaccine.
Okay, so that is for people who have recovered from COVID. What about a gap between the two doses if COVID is not in the picture?
So the second dose of vaccine will depend on the vaccine that you're taking. If you're taking Covaxin, then the second dose should be taken between 4 to 6 weeks. If you're taking Covishield, then the second dose, as per the Indian recommendation, is 6 to 8 weeks.
Dr. Guleria, in hindsight, was it a mistake to open vaccination for all? I ask you this in the backdrop of the fact that many states in India right now have stopped vaccination midway because of shortage of vaccines. Was this massive shortage of vaccines anticipated by the COVID task force, which you are a part of?
So I think it's a simple issue of trying to see what is our supply and what is the demand going to be. Even when we were talking of vaccinating everyone over the age of 45, we were looking at around 30 to 40 crore individuals. India is a very large country and we have a huge population. So if you're looking at vaccinating everyone over the age of 18, you're looking at close to, let's say, a little less than 1 billion people. And therefore, you will need 2 billion doses. This is going to be a huge challenge. The challenge that we have is how do we get so many doses? It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 2 or 3 weeks. So there will have to be a graded response. A lot of things have been done. New manufacturing plants are being set up by both the manufacturers in India. They're tying up with other manufacturing companies so as to make the vaccine. And the Sputnik vaccine is also now going to be available. And the government has allowed other international brands also to come into India. But the challenge is how do we get all of this as early as possible so as to be able to start vaccinating more and more people. It's going to take time. I don't think this is going to happen overnight. Things will smoothen out, in my mind, only by, I would say, July, when more manufacturing doses will be available. So the next few weeks are going to be a little challenging in terms of the vaccination program.
Dr. Guleria, now let's talk about something that is making headlines. Are you anticipating an outbreak of black fungus? A sudden rise in cases is already being reported in Gujarat and Maharashtra, some cases being reported from Uttar Pradesh as well. Is it only because of the increased use of steroids, or is there some other reason as well? And what can we do to prevent it from happening to us or our loved ones?
So black fungus is a fungal infection, usually what we call mucormycosis, that's the name, and it's basically causing either involvement of the lung or it causes what we call rhinocerebral mucormycosis, where it involves the sinuses and can even lead to loss of vision and can spread into the brain also. It's something which needs aggressive treatment with antifungal and surgery, and it is being seen especially in those people who have an underlying diabetes which is not under good control. So those are the ones who are predisposed to getting this fungal infection. And those who are getting high-dose steroids and drugs which decrease your immunity like tocilizumab. So I think the important thing for clinicians to understand is two. One is that be careful when you're giving steroids. You don't need to give a very high-dose steroids. You need to give it only when it's justified. Unfortunately, steroids are being given very early in the course of disease, which can lead to not only worsening of the disease, but predispose individuals, especially those who have diabetes, to getting fungal infections later on. Also, we need to be careful and judicious about use of other drugs like tocilizumab. And because of the rampant use, there is now an increasing number of fungal infections which are being seen. Okay. The second important issue is to have red flag signs, that what are the high risk groups and what should you look out for, so that you are careful that if you have this, it is diagnosed and treated early. So if you have headache, if you have some degree of decrease in your vision, or you're sort of seeing things that you have diplopia, or there is fever and worsening in your X-ray picture, then it is important that you consult your doctor and be evaluated for whether you have underlying fungal infection.
Dr. Guleria, we have spoken about ivermectin in the past, but things have changed since then. For example, the Goa government is giving all its citizens, irrespective of symptoms, the drug. They are citing various studies that have been done around the world that says that this particular drug, ivermectin, prevents severe infections. The WHO says don't use it. So the question is, since there's so much confusion, should we use it? Should we not use it?
It's a drug which is relatively safe and therefore has very minimal side effects. But the benefit of this drug is actually not that strong. What is being advocated is to use it prophylactically. There is a recommendation, limited recommendation for its use in mild illness, mild COVID illness, even in the national guidelines that it may be considered if someone has mild illness, ivermectin can be given. The data that it may be useful as prophylaxis is not that strong. Although there are some studies which have looked at it from both the point of view of ivermectin and even a drug which we were using in the past, hydroxychloroquine. I don't think we have enough evidence one way or the other, and therefore it's difficult to comment right now based on the scientific data that is there. I'm aware of studies which have shown it's useful, but there are large meta-analyses which have also shown it's not useful. But a lot of people argue that it does no harm, so it may be worthwhile to try it even if it's not that useful.
Dr. Guleria, remdesivir and dexamethasone are standard practice in the United States of America, something they call hit early and hit hard. Why are we shying away from it?
No, I don't think we're shying away for it. When you're talking of hit early and hit hard, you're talking of those with moderate illness. If you have someone who has mild disease or who is having very little symptoms, he has just fever, he has cough, but his saturation is 97, 98. He doesn't need steroids, he doesn't need remdesivir, he doesn't need to be hit hard. He's those in that 80-85% who will get all right with mild asymptomatic treatment. And this is a treatment strategy which is being done in the US, in the UK, in Europe, that all those who have had mild illness, they just give paracetamol and supportive treatment and ask them to monitor their saturation. There are huge centers in the UK which have like we have for home isolation, regular monitoring for home isolations, and only drugs for fever are given. So it's only that when you have a person who is going into a moderate illness, that he is now having a fall in oxygen saturation, the fever is now on the 5th, 6th day becoming even going up to high grade fever, or there are other features like breathlessness, chest discomfort, which suggest that the disease is progressing and you're in the moderate category, that you must hit hard with steroids and with remdesivir. That is what we do. We also would give anticoagulants, and in some cases, even convalescent plasma is given.
So let's talk about FabiFlu. Sir, it is a drug, FabiFlu is a drug that is not part of our protocol. Yet all critical care doctors are prescribing it. They are insisting that they have proven benefits. In that case, given what doctors who are treating COVID are saying, are we going to take a relook at our protocol that is currently in place?
So the protocols are re-looked very regularly by the National Task Force. They look at all drugs, including favipiravir and others, based on the scientific evidence that is there, not only from our country but internationally, and try and come out with a consensus. And these are very senior specialists from pharmacologists to clinicians to public health experts to even people from the retired very senior bureaucrats who have worked in public health, and they look at the entire data and based on that take a decision. It's not based on individual experience or based on limited studies which have been done, but based on large, good randomized controlled trial which are showing that they are useful. Therefore, favipiravir is like what we discussed, ivermectin. There are areas which use ivermectin, there are areas which use favipiravir, then there are areas in our country which still use hydroxychloroquine. The data for all of them is still not that strong that we can say that it should be aggressively mentioned or put in the national guidelines.
Okay, so the science behind plasma therapy is very confusing. So does it work? Does it not work? And if it doesn't work, like many doctors say it doesn't, why is it still part of our protocol?
So the science behind plasma is confusing because of two factors. One is what is the plasma that has to be given, and second is when should it be given. So the first point is that everyone who has had COVID and recovers, his plasma is not what we call convalescent plasma. It may not have sufficient neutralizing antibodies to really work in a person who's suffering from COVID and give him what we call passive immunity. That is, the antibodies that are present in his plasma will go into the blood of the person who has COVID-19 and will provide some degree of protection. So the first thing is that you have to have a strategy, or you have to have a lab which will test the plasma to see that the titer of the antibodies is sufficient to say that this can be useful in terms of helping the patient who's suffering from COVID-19. The second issue is that this is basically useful in the early stage when you have viral replication occurring, because these are antibodies which will try and prevent the virus from progressing. So if you are giving plasma, it has to be given early. If you're giving it, say, after 14 days, or when now you're having cytokine storm, plasma will not help in that. As a matter of fact, there was one study from the Netherlands which was giving convalescent plasma, and they found when they started giving it on the 10th day, they started taking the patient's sample to see how much antibodies the patient had. And they found that many patients had antibody titer which was more than what the plasma had, thereby indicating that plasma was not going to be useful in these patients because they had already started forming antibodies. So before the sick person forms antibodies, if you give plasma from outside and give passive immunity, it may be useful. If you give it later on, it will not be of any use. And if you give plasma which doesn't have sufficient antibodies, it will not be useful. That is why this treatment has fallen into a lot of controversies.
Sir, given how much information there is on COVID-19, especially with regards treatment, has that become a bane for doctors like you, patients and their families telling doctors the line of treatment, sometimes even pressurizing doctors to prescribe drugs or plasma?
So that has become a big issue, and I think this is because of the infodemic and the WhatsApp messages and people sort of sharing the same prescription that they had for themselves with others and saying you start the same treatment. It's important to remember two or three things. One is, like I said, majority of patients with COVID-19 will become all right with just fever medicine and without any drugs. But if they took the drug, they will say that I benefited from this drug, so this helped me. So that is how the prescriptions get sort of more weightage. So if someone had some, let's say, alternate medicine drug, or someone had some home remedies and he felt I became all right, he will prescribe it to that, but you will become all right as a natural course of the disease. So that is one thing. Second is, because of the type of prescription that are going around, there are sometimes that you're doing more harm than good. Because very often what happens is you start steroids early, you start blood thinners early, and there are patients who have had side effects of steroids. They had underlying diabetes, the sugar has gone up to 400, 500, and we just discussed that they could have fungal infections later on. Secondly, you're taking blood thinners and you may have an ulcer in your stomach, and because of that you may start suddenly having bleeding, and we've seen some patients whose hemoglobin has come down dramatically because of the irrational use of medication. So it's very important that you talk to your physician and be careful about the drugs that you're taking. Most drugs are not required in majority of patients, especially if you have mild illness.
Dr. Guleria, a Government of India advisory recommends it. So I'm asking you this. Do you recommend dark chocolate as a stress buster for COVID-19?
Well, we're going through a lot of stress time. This is actually, for most of us, and especially the healthcare professionals, a time of sorrow and misery. So whatever you can do to really de-stress yourself, please do that. I think everything is sort of permissible. So chocolates are something you could have if you're really stressed out.
Okay, glad you clarified that. Sir, to another important question that many parents are asking, the United States of America will start vaccinating children sooner rather than later. Do we see that happen in India anytime soon, anytime this year, given the fact that we are hearing that the third wave is likely to hit the young the most?
So I think it is something that is required. We already know that children are a vulnerable population, and there's some talk that if we have another wave, it will hit children hard because they are the susceptible one who would not have been covered by either the vaccine or by natural immunity. Therefore, I think it's important for us to really look at how can we protect children, and one of the most important ways of doing that is by the vaccination. There are trials going on in our country, and I'm aware that both the manufacturers are looking at vaccination in children. So I'm hopeful that in the coming few weeks, we will get data which will allow us to vaccinate young children also, and thereby be able to protect them from subsequent COVID-19 infection.
So another very frequently asked questions, can I mix vaccines? Can I use two different vaccines for my inoculation? For example, if I have taken Covaxin for the first jab and I don't have access to Covaxin by the time it comes for my second jab, can I take Covishield?
So this is an interesting question, and there are studies being done which the data should be out very soon, based on this data which studies which are being done in the UK, looking at Covishield with the Sputnik, and also looking at interchanging Pfizer with the AstraZeneca vaccine. So I think we will be able to get some data, and the hypothesis is based on two things, that maybe if you are giving two vaccines which are on a different platform, you may get a better immune response than what you would get by taking the same shot again. We don't have enough data right now, so the current recommendation is to stick to the same vaccine as far as the second shot is concerned. Like you rightly said, if this proved to be useful, then it would allow us to play around with the vaccine doses, and we may be able to really vaccinate more people with the combinations that we could use.
And a related question then, will we need a third booster jab? There is already some talk about it, doctor.
So this is an important question, but a tough question, because we don't have concrete data. But I do feel that we may need to take another shot at some point in time. May not be very early, but later on, based on two factors. One is how long the immunity of the current vaccine will last, and whether it wanes, and therefore we have a chance of reinfection, and therefore we need to have another booster dose. And secondly, whether newer variants which sort of emerge in the coming months are the ones which may cause the vaccine efficacy to come down, and because of that we may need to take a vaccine which has been modified or tweaked to some extent to cover for emerging variants. So this is something that we will have to see in the coming months. But there is a possibility, like for influenza, we recommend an annual vaccine. We may be moving in that direction as far as COVID-19 is concerned.
So you're part of India's COVID task force. Is there an assessment by when this current wave we are seeing will peak, and by when should we be anticipating that dreaded third wave?
These are very difficult questions to answer. My own take is that the pandemic will move, and it's moving from west to east. We've seen that cases in the western part of the country have now sort of plateaued and may start coming down. Central India is still having cases coming up, but I think hopefully by the second half of this month, we should start seeing some stabilization in cases as far as Central India is concerned. But the pandemic may move more eastwards, and we may see a rise in cases then in the eastern part of our country, and then that will also come down gradually. So hopefully we should see a decline in the pandemic in the coming, let's say, 1 to 2 months. After that, if we are able to get a large number of people vaccinated, if we are able to continue, and we now realize the importance of COVID appropriate behavior, and we are careful in terms of the activities that we do, then the third wave, if it comes during the later part, or during, I would say, the end of the year, will not be as strong, and I am confident that it will be a very small wave.
So with COVID, you know it's not over till it's over. So when will this be over, and when can things go back to normal? I understand normalcy is a relative term, but still, if you can answer that question.
So once all of this is there, then probably, hopefully by next year, we will have the number of cases under control. We'll have a large number of people vaccinated, and therefore we will be gradually coming back to life as we knew it in the pre-COVID era, with a lot of restrictions to begin with. But I'm hopeful, and then we could talk of traveling more often than what we are doing right now.
All right, Dr. Guleria, thank you very much for taking all our questions and clearing the air on subjects that have conflicting studies and science backing them. Thank you very much for doing this FAQ session with us. With that, I'm slipping into a quick break on the show. Up next, we are telling you why Amitabh Bachchan has put something very special on his Instagram page. That's coming up next. Do stay with us. Welcome back. Amitabh Bachchan, someone whose entire family was down with COVID and fought back, has a very special message for all of you. We are leaving you with that. Thanks for watching.
रुके न दे, धनुष उठा प्रहार कर, तू सबसे पहला वार कर। अग्नि सी धधक धधक, हिरण सी सजग सजग, सिंह सी दहाड़ कर, शंख सी पुकार कर। रुके न तू, थके न तू, झुके न तू, थमे न तू, सदा चले थके न तू, रुके न तू, झुके न तू। These words, written by my father, Dr. Harivansh Rai Bachchan, are a clarion call that reminds us to never give up. They were written at a time the country faced a different crisis and challenge. But even today, they resonate. I believe these words celebrate the spirit of the COVID warriors, our frontline workers, who, as we all know, are sacrificing so much for all of us. It is time we support them and bolster the fight against COVID. This is our fight. We can all contribute in whatever way we can. We must come together. We must all come together for India.